This is Tar Heel Talk, an in-depth look at the issues and people making news in North Carolina. Here's your host, Sonia Williams.
Hello, and thanks for joining us. My guest today is a celebrated author, speaker, and award-winning marketing executive. He's now working to ignite change in communities around the country by building bridges across racial, cultural, social, and political lines. And joining me now to tell us more about his work is True Pettigrew, CEO of True Access. Thank you so much for being with us.
It's my pleasure. I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Right. Now, you call yourself a bridge builder.
Yes.
What exactly does that mean?
I focus on helping individuals and organizations build bridges and bridge gaps across differences where they may have differences. So whether those are social differences, racial differences, cultural differences, political differences, generational differences, I come in and I help people understand how to build bridges across those areas where they have distance. And it's, if you look at the climate that we're in right now, there are a lot of differences that's going on in society right now, so it's keeping me busy.
Talk about some of the work that you're doing, because I know that you're working with not only companies, but police departments,
Yes.
and talk a little bit about the work that you're doing.
Well, I'm working a lot with law enforcement agencies and educators, schools, middle schools, high schools, and colleges, helping them bridge the gaps across the racial divide. It's a lot of racial tension going on in society right now. And it's no secret the challenges that have been going on with law enforcement and communities of color. And so someone that was, and I can acknowledge and recognize that was contributing to the divide because of my thoughts and feelings and even lived experiences with law enforcement and contributing to that divide, just frustrated and so angry and complaining about everything that was going on. I got tired of complaining about it and decided that I needed to do something about it. So I live in Cary, and so I went down to my local police department one day out of frustration to say, hey, look, out of concern for my son, not wanting him to be a victim or exposed to some of the things that I've been seeing in media and social media. And the officer that I ended up meeting with, his name's JB, he's a lieutenant now, Lieutenant Jeremy Bergen, to be official, but he's my man, JB. And he challenged me to help him figure out how I could not only how he could change my perceptions and feelings, but how we could work together to change the perceptions and feelings of other communities. So based on my background in advertising and speaking and marketing and training, I developed a program specifically for law enforcement called Cohort, which stands for Community Organizers Helping Officers Restore Trust. And so now it's a diversity training program that I offer specifically for law enforcement.
Wow.
To help them understand how to build more meaningful relationships with the diverse communities that they serve. So it's a lot of fun too. It's gratifying to see the transformation that you can make in the lives of the people that you're speaking to.
And so one program that you started with the Cary Police Department has grown into a program that you're working with police departments across the country. Across the country,
yeah. And maybe, we'll see, maybe even internationally, because I was invited just a couple of weeks ago to the IACP, which is the International Association of Chiefs of Police. It's a conference that they have every year. This past year, they had it in Philadelphia. And so I was invited to the IACP to speak based on the work that we've been doing in this region. So it started with Cary, and then it spread to other departments and agencies throughout the state. So it went from Cary to Apex to Raleigh to Morrisville to Roxborough to Rocky Mountain. So it's caught on.
When you talk about working with and providing that diversity training for law enforcement officers, what are some of the messages that you share that you think maybe sometimes aren't as obvious to law enforcement?
Well, it's interesting. Whether they aren't as obvious, I think a lot of it are things that we know, but we lose sight of, right? I think there's some foundational things, and maybe for everybody it's not things that we know, but I think some of it is a revelation to some people. But some of the basic principles, if you will, is one is to seek first to understand before being understood. Sounds simple, right? But that's not our nature, just as human beings.
Right.
You know, if you're in a disagreement with someone, your focus is on trying to prove your point, that you're not even listening to their perspective and where they're coming from to even consider the fact that what they're saying is valid. And another one of the big lessons that seems to be a big aha moment for a lot of the officers is I always tell them, look, life is not the way it should be. It's the way that it is, right? Because we say, well, people should, and they shouldn't paint us with the same broad brush, and they should do this, it's like, you're right. They should, and they shouldn't, but they're not. So now what are we gonna do, right? Life is not the way it should be. It's the way that it is, but it's how we approach it that makes all the difference in the world and how we can proceed and make progress moving forward. So those are just a couple of the lessons.
So how long do you work with law enforcement officers and their departments? Is that a one-time workshop for them, or is it a series of workshops with them?
Well, particularly with Cary, where I live, it's been ongoing. I've been working with the Cary PD for the last 3.5 years and developing programs for community outreach and community engagement. The training, the cohort training, is a full-day training. It's a one-day, full-day, 8-hour training. So different departments and different agencies may conduct multiple trainings to reach a number of different officers. So if you've got a staff of 200 and you want everyone to undergo the training, then you break it out into multiple training sessions. We've developed programs. Barbershop rap sessions is one of the things that we do, and we do that monthly. So in Cary, we do it quarterly in Apex, quarterly in Raleigh, so different agencies and departments have a different level of frequency. But the most consistent one is the one that we do in Cary, Headliners Barbershop in Cary, first Saturday of every month. We do what we call barbershop rap sessions, where we invite the police officers into the barbershop so that they can have some candid and courageous conversations with the patrons in the barbershop.
Why the barbershop?
Because that's it. If you, particularly with the Black community, right? And it started that way because a lot of the tension and contention was between law enforcement and Black males.
And that's a place where barbershop's a place where a lot of those things are discussed.
That is one of the most trusted venues and voices of the community, particularly for the Black community. And it is a place of comfort, it is a place of refuge, it is for Black men historically. That is the place you go to talk about anything and everything, right? And so the conversations about law enforcement were happening anyway. Those conversations were happening in the barbershop. And then I realized, okay, if we really want to affect change, the voice that's missing in this conversation is the voice of the officers. And those, trust me when I tell you, those first couple of sessions that we had were very uncomfortable.
Oh, I can imagine.
Very uncomfortable. But now here we are 3.5 years later, and the relationships are so genuine. And you can be as transparent as you want and just upfront and as candid as you want, and people receive it in the spirit in which it's intended for whoever's saying whatever they're saying.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, we've got to take a break. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit more about the impact that those conversations are having and how other people can get connected and start those conversations in their own communities.
Love to.
All right. We're back with more Tar Heel Talk after these messages. My guest today is an author and speaker who is working to help build better relationships between law officers and communities and educators and their students. With us again is True Pettigrew, CEO of True Access. Now, True, before the break, you were talking about the work that you're doing with law enforcement officers, particularly in your hometown of Cary, or the city where you're living right now, Cary, and those barbershop rap sessions where you have law officers go into the barbershops and have those conversations with patrons. What has been the impact of those rap sessions?
Oh, it's been phenomenal, and it's been genuine and meaningful relationships with law enforcement officers and the members of the community, particularly the Black community and residents and patrons that come into that barbershop from all over the area, because everyone that comes to that barbershop, it's not limited to just Cary residents. So you have residents from Durham, residents from Raleigh, residents from Marsville and Apex and all over. And it's meaningful relationships that have been established, and biases and prejudices and barriers that have been broken down because people have taken the time to truly get to know each other. And so where perceptions that officers may have had about members of the Black community, particularly Black males, has now been transformed because they've taken the time to get to know some of these young men. And the same with the young men. I can tell you there were guys that have participated in these rap sessions that did not trust any law enforcement. And that perception and that attitude has now been transformed because they've gotten to know these people on a human level. Right. So it's really changed mindsets. It's changed hearts and minds is the biggest impact, that it's changed hearts and minds, and those hearts and minds that have been changed are now changing other hearts and minds.
And that is powerful. How can people find out more information about the work that you're doing and get connected with you?
They can go to the website, which is true-access.com. So they can go to true-access.com, or they can follow me on any of my social media at TrueAccess, at TRUACCESS.
Okay. Yeah. Now, I know that you're doing a lot of work with schools and working with faculty on diversity training as well. Talk a little bit about some of the issues and concerns that you encounter in a different way when you're talking about faculty and staff and in a school environment.
Well, a lot of it is helping them getting comfortable talking about race. People are so uncomfortable talking about race, and so whenever there are issues in the schools with students that are behaving in an inappropriate way and doing inappropriate things as it relates to race, whether it's something that they're saying, doing something that they think is funny, that is offensive from a race standpoint, the teachers oftentimes aren't clear about how to address that and how to handle that. People are uncomfortable talking about race for three main reasons, right? I think it's fear, confusion, and control. They're afraid to say something that they think may be out of line, that could cause them to get in trouble or offend someone. Confusion, they just don't know how to approach the conversation or start it off. And then control, they feel as though, because to talk about it, you're gonna have to get transparent and vulnerable to some degree. And you feel like you lose some control of this, perceived control of this authoritative figure if you allow yourselves to be vulnerable and transparent. So we help them understand how to appropriately address the conversation and the topic of race with students and their colleagues, right?
So what are some of the tips and strategies that you share with faculty? Like you said, it can be uncomfortable to talk about race, particularly if you're having to talk about talk about a situation that involves someone that's of a race that's different than your own.
Right. The first thing I would really want to make sure people understand is talking about race does not make you racist. Like, people feel like, now I've been accused of being a racist, I've been accused of being a race baiter simply because I talk about race. Talking about race does not make you racist, it does not make you a race baiter. But unless we talk about it, we will never be able to move forward and make any progress. Now, we can't stop at the conversation, but unless we have the conversation, we'll not be able to address the challenges and the pain that the conversation causes. So one of the things that I encourage people to do is be willing to meet people where they are, literally, physically, mentally, spiritually. And there's an acronym that we use for meeting people where they are, and that M is make time to engage. The first E is explore the similarities and differences, because that's okay. We're more alike than we are different, but it's okay that we have differences. And then the second E is to encourage respect. Do not discount someone else's realities just because they're not your own, right?
That's important.
Yeah, just because it didn't happen to you doesn't mean it's not happening and it didn't happen to someone else. And then the T in that MEET model is to take responsibility. And that can be one of the toughest ones. is oftentimes we may be contributing to the problem more than we realize, and we need to take responsibility for our own actions, behaviors, and biases, and understanding how that could potentially be contributing to the divisiveness that exists.
I think it's important too for all of us, not just in a school setting, but for all of us to understand and recognize our own biases, because we all have them.
Yes.
And so how do we begin to do that?
Just taking a look at how, taking the time to listen and talk to other people, and understanding that those unconscious biases, those implicit biases, aren't necessarily an indictment on you, because those are ways that we've been conditioned to think based on our lived experiences, the things we see and hear in the media, the practices and policies that are in place by our government and bureaucracies. So those things condition the way that we think. So unless we are actually getting to know others, whoever others are. So if I'm a black male, a other could be a black female. If a other for me could be a white person, Hispanic person. Getting to know others. I had a man say to me one time after a training, he was like, you know what, True? I'm a 60-year-old white male, and everything that I have ever known or believed about black people, I learned from white people.
Wow.
I've never taken the time to actually get to know any black people myself. And so that's how those biases are formed, is because we don't allow ourselves the opportunity to familiarize ourselves with others.
Excellent point. We're going to take another break. We'll talk more in just a minute.
All right.
Don't go away. Tar Heel Talk will continue after these messages. Welcome back to Tar Heel Talk. I'm Sonia Williams. We're talking today with True Pettigrew. He's an author, speaker, and CEO of True Access. Now, True, you have been talking about all the work that you're doing, helping to build bridges between law enforcement officers in the community and faculty and staff in schools and their students, helping to understand each other better. But you've also written a book that will help us understand a certain group of people better. It's called Millennials Revealed.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Well, in my advertising career, I was an advertising executive for almost 20 years, about 20 years. And my focus was helping my clients understand how to connect with youth, young adult, and multicultural audiences. So I essentially grew up with millennials, not as a millennial, but studying them to help my clients develop campaigns that would resonate with them. As millennials began to matriculate into the workforce, I realized there was a different need and opportunity to not only help my clients market to them in the marketplace, but now there was the challenge of integrating them into the workplace. And a lot of organizations were struggling with that. So Millennials Revealed essentially serves as a guide to help people understand how to better connect with this generation of youth and young adults, of millennials, and to be able to essentially, as we spoke about earlier, meet them where they are and be able to connect with them and resonate with them and help them accomplish their dreams while still contributing to the organizations in a meaningful way.
Okay, you've got to help us out here. What are some things that those of us who work with millennials need to know and understand about millennials and their work style?
There are three things that I will say, right? And we talk about the defining this age of this generation. One, there are over 80 million millennials, right? So it's hard to put over 80 million people in a box.
Right.
But from a generational kind of standpoint, there are some generational truths and consistencies. In this generation, I consider the connection age generation. And a lot of that has been driven by the advent of technology that they've been exposed to. And so the technology, understand, has influenced behaviors and values with this generation that weren't even possible to exist with other generations because the technology wasn't even present to influence those values and behaviors. So that is something that's unique. It's the first generation of digital natives. And so those connection age attributes have really driven them to want to be connected to passion, purpose, and people where I think we relegate connection to digital connections and technological connections. It's transcended that, and now that it has driven millennials to want to be connected to their passions. What do I really care about? I want to be connected to purpose. I want to know that I'm contributing to something meaningful, and always want to understand why are we doing what we're doing. That's the purpose behind it. And contrary to popular belief, they want to be connected to people, but only the people that can truly inspire them, not just influence them, but inspire them to achieve their dreams.
Okay, help our viewers understand exactly the age group, the age range we're talking about when we're talking about millennials.
Millennials, yep, from 1981 to 2000. It defines the millennial cohort.
Okay.
Yep.
So my son would be among that cohort, so certainly can understand some of those attributes. When you're talking about a millennial outside of the workplace, just in general, what are some of the things that you work with them on about helping them understand themselves?
One of the biggest things I find myself sharing with millennials is that do not confuse information with knowledge. And I think oftentimes they can be dismissive of members of older generations because they feel like they know more because they have the access to information for millennials is unprecedented. And because they have access to information and may be able to articulate something because they've Googled it or seen it or have access to it, that has caused them to think they might know more. But I remind them that information is not knowledge until it's been applied. And so be willing to hear and receive from members of older generations who have the experience of applying the information, because they're basing that input off of some knowledge.
Absolutely. How can people get this book?
It's on Amazon. You can also go to my website and order it from the website at true-access.com, and it's also available on Amazon.
Okay. So definitely something I think that every office should have moving forward.
I would agree.
Now, you do a lot of training, not just with public entities, but with private companies as well. Talk a little bit about the training, some of the other trainings that you provide to help people better understand how to communicate with each other.
Yeah, I do. My focus areas are on leadership, diversity and inclusion, cross-generational team building, which is a lot of it comes from the information from this book, and then in purpose, helping people understand purpose and lead with purpose and maintaining a clarity of purpose in the way that they operate as individuals or as an organization. So I train businesses on discovering their brand purpose, because once that brand has clarity of purpose, it gives meaning to everything else that they do. I do trainings called Leading Across the Generations to help organizations be more effective 21st century leaders, because there are 4, sometimes 5 different generations coexisting in the workforce, and being able to get all of them to work together as a seamlessly integrated unit can be challenging.
Okay. And people can find out more information by going to your website?
Absolutely.
And that is true-access.com.
That's it. That's
and
me.
They can find out more information about the trainings that you provide and possibly connect with you to get some of that training.
Yes.
All right, True Pettigrew, so it's such a pleasure having you here. Thank you so much for sharing this information with us today.
It's been my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right. That's it for this week's Tar Heel Talk. To comment on this or other episodes of the show, like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, or send us an email to tarheeltalk@fox50.com. I'm Sonia Williams. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you again next week.